Sí. Bona tarda a totes i a tots. Us vull donar la benvinguda en aquesta quarta sessió del curs Lenin, un enfocament contemporani. Vaig dir-vos també que és un orgull la sessió que hem pogut fer fins ara. Vam començar la història de Joan de Falla parlant del concepte de revolució, vam seguir amb l'economista Ramon Franquesa parlant de l'imperialisme. Fa poquet, fa poques setmanes, l'historiadora Ara Cellers ens va fer la introducció a la lluita de classes i al paper de la pagesia al llarg de la Revolució Russa. I avui tenim la sort de poder comptar amb nosaltres, amb en Michael Breen, que ha vingut especialment de Berlín, que no està pas a l'hora, gràcies a la col·laboració del Partit de l'Esquerra Europea, del qual Comunistes de Catalunya és membre a través de l'Esquerra Unida Alternativa. En Michael va néixer l'any 54, va estudiar filosofia a Berlín i a Leningrad i ha acabat convertint-se en un reconegut filòsof i científic social. En Michael va ser representant de la xarxa Transform Europe fins l'any 2009, una xarxa de fundacions d'esquerres d'arreu d'Europa, de la qual la Fundació Neus Català en són membres també. És membre de l'Institute for Critical Social Analysis de la Fundació Rosa Luxemburg. Va ser director d'aquest institut del 2008 al 2013 i així mateix va ser president del Consell Científic i Associació de la Fundació Rosa Luxemburg entre l'any 2019 i el 2023. El seu treball a nivell acadèmic i d'investigació se centra en la teoria i la història del socialisme i del comunisme, la transformació socioecològica de les societats capitalistes burgeses i els problemes estratègics de l'esquerra. Abans de donar-li pas, només vull comentar que si algú té més ganes de Lenin, perquè ara ve l'estiu i no farem cap més sessió fins setembre i sembla que l'estiu se li farà massa llarg sense parlar de Vladimir, el mes de juliol, els Oriols de l'UB, estem preparant un curs que es diu Goodbye Lenin, una pregunta, evidentment una pregunta que emplaça a dir que no Goodbye Lenin, i que encara sou temps de comptar-vos-hi. Sense res més per dir-vos, deixo en Michael que ens faci l'exposició d'avui i ens parlarà sobre Lenin i l'Estat. Gràcies.
Good evening. I won't try to speak Spanish because I'm in Catalonia, and so I do not want to offend you with my Spanish, which is really very, very poor. I'm very, very thankful to be here today, and also I want to thank the organizers, and it's an honor to speak today about Lenin. Of course, to speak about Lenin 100 years after his death seems to be a little bit strange. When I came to study, it's exactly 50 years ago, I started to study philosophy at the Leningrad State University, exactly 50 years ago. And then I came by the airplane, and then I went by bus to the inner city. There was a slogan on one of the houses there. And in Russian it sounds very short. Lenin живее живых. Lenin is more living than those who are living today. There is more present, let's say. More present than all the others who are living today. As you can imagine, I was at this time 20 years old, and somehow I felt very strange about it. That somebody who died 50 years ago is living more than I'm living today. Now it's 100 years after his death, and somehow when I'm now reading about Lenin and the war, Lenin about class struggle, Lenin about the duties of revolutionaries, I'm feeling that really somehow he is with us more than at least 50 years ago, maybe. Because the times we are living now in, the times of the war, maybe even of a world war, of a nuclear war, the time of a new Cold War, the time of ecological catastrophe, and so on, put the ideas of Lenin and of course of Marx and Gramsci again on the agenda. Reading him today, it's maybe, I feel more that he is important, at least to me. And I think if we are reading Lenin, this with regard to my lecture here, if we are reading Lenin today, I don't think we should look for answers. We should not look for ready answers. We can take and make the same. That won't work at all. But what we can do, we can see how one of the most important persons, left persons, or maybe the most important left person of the 20th century, how he wanted to find answers, analyzing the problems of his time and organizing forces to change Russian history and world history. That means, I would say, what we can learn by analyzing, by studying Lenin, is to learn to solve our own problems, the problems of our time. To learn how to learn, I would say. This is the best how we can deal with Lenin. There was a very nice poem by the German communist poet Bertolt Brecht about peasants celebrating the birthday of Lenin and what to do. And they decided not to build a monument for Lenin, but they decided to solve a very urgent problem in their own village. So the sentence in the last sentence is they were honoring Lenin by benefiting themselves. And by benefiting themselves, they were honoring Lenin. I think this is really how we should also deal with Gramsci, Marx, Luxemburg, and so on. To speak about Lenin and the state is a challenge because there's no theory of state by Lenin, at least from my point of view. Why? We had already today a discussion on if Lenin was a philosopher or not. I think he was, for himself, his self-understanding was, he was a person who wanted to change the world, and he was using philosophy, creatively dealing creatively with philosophy, with economy, economic science, with political economy, with social sciences, and empiricism, theories on imperialism, because he wanted to know how we can change the world. And the problem is when you are reading Lenin on the state, you will find totally opposing views. And this is because his statements as a person who wants to intervene, who wants to convince others how they can proceed and what should be done, his sentences are, I would say, like bullets. He wanted to make it clear. He wanted to make it very concentrated on one point. And maybe in 1970, the direction was there, and in 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, he had to change the direction. There was also a very interesting sentence, the remark of Lenin when he was at the, I think, the third Congress of the Comintern. He said, at the moment now, it was this, what he wrote a very interesting work about left communism as a child, that means the people are sick, sickness of the left. At this time, a lot of people were so enthusiastic about changing the world, they forgot that there must be real conditions for it. So he said, in this moment, I must go to the right. So you see, he was very flexible, dialectical, because he saw all these contradictions, and that's why he never formed a coherent understanding of all these contradictions. He had no time, of course, and then he died very early at the age of 54. So that's why I will try to bring some ideas to the floor. Lenin was developing at different times, and I think we should see if we can use one or the other idea. And you see, what I feel interesting is how he tried at all these times to deal with the contradictions and the concrete task which he was facing. Let's start with the famous work State and Revolution. State and Revolution. This is firstly interesting because I wrote this small book here, Rediscovering Lenin, where I try to make clear how he prepared, especially starting with the beginning of the First World War in August 1914 for the coming revolution. He was totally clear. He had the experiences of the lost war against Japan, of Russia, and then came the first Russian Revolution. He said, the Tsarist regime will lose against Germany. And he was right. They were losing this war, and so he said, okay, that means there will be a revolution. And he was preparing it at different stages, and I try to explain it in this book. You can find it in the internet. And one problem he had not tackled before came in the end of 1916. That means very close to the start of the Russian Revolution. Because Bukharin, a very young communist at this time, wrote about, he wanted to organize communist political current in the Bolshevist party, and he said we must put the problem of communism on the agenda. And Lenin was aware that now, okay, maybe the revolution is really very close. So now we must think, what will we do after having the power? That means he was already preparing for time ahead, about a year ahead, and what that means. And he was confronted with the problem that Bukharin and others said, okay, if we have the power, the state will wither away. It's some kind of anarchism that was behind there, because then we have a new society and there won't be any need for a state. And on the other hand, he was opposing Kautsky and the right-wing social democrats who thought that the socialist state is somehow just a continuation and a different form of the existing state. So he had these two opponents. One very radical, saying we should abolish the state at all, and the other saying we should just change the use of the existing state, using all these institutions. And what is also typical for Lenin, when it came to most important questions, he referred to Marx and Engels. He was really a pupil of Marx and Engels. So he sat down and he made notes of all the books he could get into his hands. He was collecting all them all the time. There's a notebook published later, Marxism and the State, where he quoted all what Marx and Engels had said about the state. And also Kautsky, but especially Marx and Engels, especially of course about the Paris Commune and so on. And then he had no time to finish this work on State and Revolution, but in June there was an uprising, a failed uprising in June already, in June 1917, and Lenin had to hide himself in Finland. Finland at this time was close to to Petersburg, to Leningrad. And so he could not intervene directly in Petersburg, so he had some time. And he wrote at this time this famous work, State and Revolution. And what were the most important ideas he developed? The first idea was for him, I'm quoting, the state is a product and a manifestation of the irreconcilability of class antagonism. That means we have class contradictions you can't reconcile. That means, and that's why the state is needed to live with these antagonistic contradictions and to keep them under the control of the ruling class. That was the first idea, and he was also very clear to overthrow this state, we must be violent and we must destruct the state apparatus of power. That was for him totally clear. The second idea was that, and this goes back to Marx, and maybe it goes also back to Blanqui, and goes even back to Babeuf of the Great French Revolution, the first who tried to attempt a coup d'etat from a communist point of view. We must organize a dictatorship of the proletariat. That was also a central idea of Marx and Engels. And Marx also said there will be a long time of this dictatorship of the proletariat. Often today it sounds crazy. Why dictatorship? And why for a long time? The idea behind was, if we want to establish a new society from the foundations on, that is a tremendous transformation, a long-term transformation of the whole mode of production, the whole mode of life, of culture, and so on. And to keep this under control, we need dictatorship. Today, often the word dictatorship sounds terrifying, but it refers to the role of the dictators in the Rome Republic. That means the people are giving persons a special power, empowering them to go on to in times of civil war and so on, and to solve problems. That the kind of democratic dictatorship was the idea behind. And then Lenin said, using the ideas of Marx especially and Engels, then of course this state of the dictatorship should be totally different. And I think a lot of you know it. It means arming the workers. It means a kind of primitive democracy, a kind of primitive, very easy democracy, not this complicated bureaucratic machine. That means also the official functions will be realized by ordinary workers, by ordinary peasants, by ordinary, even not highly uneducated people. So we must simplify all these functions of the state. And of course also the unity of legislative power, executive power, and judicative power. Okay, this was the idea which Lenin used with reference to Marx. There is one problem. If you are reading carefully State and Revolution, you have two ideas which are very difficult to reconcile. On the one hand, he is developing these ideas which are very close even to the anarchist ideas, how to self-organize, and how to do it directly from the bottom up, and also idealizing somehow the Paris Commune, because it was different. But nevertheless, he had these radical democratic elements, totally radical. On the other hand, they had the vision. For me as a German, it's interesting. Here's the idea that the apparatus which will be established is like the German postal office. And for him, the German postal office was the ideal form of bureaucratic organization. You can imagine the postal office 100 years ago, how it was from the above, and everybody was a bureaucrat, not thinking why I'm doing it and so on, but just obeying to the command from above. You have a perfect machinery. Today, our postal office is not any longer a perfect machinery, not to speak about the German railway. And on the other hand, you have this radical democracy. So two ideas Lenin was using at the same time in the same work. Very conflicting ideas. And he went with these ideas, which were spread, of course, also in the Social Democratic and Bolshevist Party. At this time, he went with these contradictory ideas to the revolution. And so, on the one hand, extension of the democracy. On the other hand, a dictatorship using a perfect machinery. There's one problem you will find also in State and Revolution, which is very interesting, because he was clear that he was convinced that this dictatorship should be much more democratic for the workers, but should restrict freedom for the oppressors, for the bourgeois class, for the feudal classes, and so on, and don't give them any chance to express their own opinions, their own will anymore. So you see, on the one hand, total freedom for the workers, and no freedom to the enemy. No freedom to the enemy. It's different with Rosa Luxemburg. She said, freedom is always the freedom of the others, the dissenters. Okay. I quote it now. It is clear that there is no freedom and no democracy where there is suppression and where there is violence. That means if there is suppression, if there is violence, no freedom at all. You see how he is thinking. Either or. Either total freedom or total suppression and no freedom at all. At this time and this made him so able and so willing to go for the hardest measures after the revolution, because he was thinking in these terms. A third problem in the State and Revolution I want to mention. And this is, I think, even for me at least the most astonishing part of Lenin's analysis of Marx and Engels' ideas about the state. And in this point he becomes truly creative. Marx wrote, I think the majority of you know, a critique of the Gotha Programme. The Gotha Programme is the Social Democratic Party in 1875. And there he was criticizing the illusions of the Social Democratic Party, and he said we need a dictatorship of the proletariat, and in the first stages after the revolution, the society is still marked by the old society, the Börsmarx, he's calling it, of the old society. And that means we have contradictions. And this is very important, I think, until today. There are even in a socialist society, this is the first stages, he said, we have contradiction between all of us in this society as private individuals. He's speaking about socialism as collection of private individuals because we have here our own interests. We are contributing by our abilities and we are receiving by our contribution to the others. So that means we are measured by, Marx is saying, by bourgeois law. We are regarded as formal equal, even if we are not equal at all. But it looks okay, he's much stronger than me, he's working much better than me, so he will get much more food than me. Yeah? So we are not regarded in our concrete needs, but we are regarded on the formal measurement. Yeah? And that's why this is bourgeois law. And what was Lenin saying, and was totally new, if there's bourgeois law, there should be also a bourgeois state. This is, I think, to write such a thing, yeah, that the dictatorship of the proletariat will combine with a bourgeois state because it's imposing this formal equivalent measurement, that means imposing bourgeois law. This, I think, is an outstanding ability of creative thinking, even if it's not a nice, somehow not a nice idea, yeah, to think about a socialist state, which is also a bourgeois state. This was really, I think, outstanding ability at this time, hiding there. He really, you can see if you are reading Lenin, you can often see when he had time and he was forced to rest, how he started to go beyond a lot of limits of the left. So he was writing bourgeois state without the bourgeoisie. This is the dictatorship of the proletariat also. Okay. Then I come to the second point. So he was prepared, as you see, he had very contradictory ideas, radical democracy on the one hand, postal office and machinery on the other hand, total freedom and very hard suppression and no freedom at all. So he went to the revolution with very opposing ideas. Then came the overthrow of the provisional government and you may know, or should know at least, that at this time the Bolsheviks also and all the other forces were preparing for the election for the Constitutional Assembly of Russia. This was the idea for 100 years, from the Decapists, that means the uprising against the Tsar in 1825, on. There was a common idea, if we are overthrowing the Tsar, we will give all, at least the male persons of Russia and the Russian Empire, the right to vote and for a constitutional assembly, and they will meet and make a new constitution, forming a new state. And also the Bolsheviks were demanding this for all the time of their existence. But then the problem emerged, because the power was now in the hand of the Bolsheviks, together with the left social revolutionaries. They formed this government of the Soviets, and the elections for the Constitutional Assembly were going on. Lenin was immediately after having the state power into his hand against going on with the elections. But it was difficult to stop this process. So the majority in the party and the social revolutionaries left also said, let's go on. But what happened? They met in early January 1918, and there was an order, they can meet, and then the head of the Soviet government, Sverdlov, came to the assembly and said to them, okay, don't worry, but you have just one task. You must approve all the laws by our government, by the Soviet government. This whatever, you have no right to do anything else. But in the assembly, the majority was with the social revolutionaries, and of course they did not comply. And in the late night, the guards, the revolutionary guards, came to the head of the assembly and said, "Go home, we are tired. We are tired. Now we want to have a rest, you must go out." Lenin gives the command not to harm anybody of them, but to expel them and to close the doors forever. To close the doors forever. They never met again. They tried to met them in Siberia, but okay, because Lenin said there can't be any, again, dual power. Let's say, kind of social revolutionary power in the assembly and the Soviet power in our hands in the Smolny. Okay. And he said, the interests of this revolution stand higher than the formal rights of the assembly. And he also said that when they met, the Congress of the Soviets met immediately afterwards, he said very clearly, I'm quoting it now, "Comrades, all these accusations against us of employing terror, dictatorship, civil war, we are still far away from this, but we are stronger than the others. But we are the only government, no other government has done it. We say clearly, we have started and we are waging civil war against the exploiters." And of course for him also that means terror, using terror. He was totally clear about this. No third way. Either you are with us or you are against us. And so he developed several ideas in the years of the Civil War. The Civil War lasted almost 4 years, 1918, 19, 1920, and also part of 1921. And about 10 million people were killed or starving and dying during this civil war. Okay. Again, he said during this time, the state is the machine for the oppression of one class of the other. He referred to the ideas he had already developed before. And he also, and this is a problem when we are asking about the state theory of Lenin at this time, he missed the dual character of the liberal state, because the liberal state, of course, is a machine for oppression, for keeping the ruling capitalist class in power. Totally clear about this. But on the other hand, of course, the liberal state, and I think a larger part of the left is defending that, why this part of the liberal state is also defending individual rights of assembly, of free speech, of opinion, and so on and so on. And there is this idea liberal state should defend life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and property. And all the time before the revolution, also the Bolsheviks have defended and criticized the Tsarist regime for not realizing the liberal ideas of the state. Okay. So in this mode of thinking of Lenin at this time, there was no liberal legacy of socialism or to somehow preserve. This also is with regard to the dictatorship of the proletariat and civil liberties. For him, even with regard to the individual proletarians, individual members of the working class, it's not about defending their rights as individuals. They are only the rights as a class members, as a class together, but not as individuals. And you all, I think, know anarchism was in Spain and I think also in Catalonia very strong at some time. You all know this dispute between Marx and Bakunin. I don't want to, I have no need to quote it here. How Bakunin was quite far-sighted, criticizing what happens when he said, you are claiming that dictatorship, our dictatorship or your dictatorship is realizing freedom. But I'm sure in the moment you have the dictatorship, you will forget all freedoms. And Bakunin and the anarchists said liberty can be created only by liberty. But Marx, and especially Lenin, said to create, and they wanted to have a society of freedom. The society, as Marx and Engels were writing in the manifesto, a society where the free development of all is a condition of the free development of, the free development of everybody, of each of us, is a condition of the free development of all. That means this was the idea. We have free development of the individuals and we have the free development of all of us together. That was the idea, that was the idea of communism. But for this, for some time, the freedoms of the individuals must be restricted by the dictatorship of the proletariat. And what is also interesting, I'm now quoting again, he's writing in 1918 against Kautsky, this is an unbelievable sentence. Dictatorship does not necessarily mean the abolition of democracy for the class that exercises the dictatorship. That means dictatorship does not necessarily mean the abolition of democracy for the workers. Not necessarily, but under conditions. That is what is written in this sentence. It can mean we are abolishing even the democracy for the workers, if it's necessary. Okay. So for Lenin, after having the power in the hands of the Bolshevist leadership, the whole struggle for democracy lost its importance because this democratic means could harm this power, could destroy this power. And if you are looking back 35 years ago, how democratic elections in Eastern Europe and then in the Soviet Union destroyed really the communist rule. Okay. So this is also part of the problem. I don't want to go into much more details about this time. One additional remark. Also about the state revolution. The Social Democrats had the idea, also Engels said, we are organizing the workers, and the workers are becoming the majority of the population, and by organizing all the workers together, by free elections, we will take power. That means we have the majority of the voters, and we have the power in our hands. That means by the way of liberal democracy, creating socialist power. Lenin was convinced that this way will never work, he said. He said, look on Germany, even Germany, we have only 1 million members of the Social Democratic Party, and we have, I think, 3 million members of the trade unions. How can you think you will ever get the majority, real majority, as a power, yeah? And so he said, the real measurement of power is not the elections, it's civil war. Civil war is, that's why the only way, already the first day of the World War I, he said we are striving for civil war. He wanted to say for revolution. He said for civil war, because only by civil war we can get to power and we can keep in power. And so the new state will be organized by civil war. The last remark about this time. There was a discussion, of course, in Soviet Russia during the Civil War about violence and terror. There was red terror and white terror. And there was also the question if there's any distinction between violence and terror. Lenin said, of course, maybe in a manual of sociology you will find such nice distinctions, but not in reality. And you must understand, he was using very self-confident and almost without any restrictions the method of terror. And terror is nevertheless a very special form of violence. And Lenin was aware about it, because terror is directed against people as a symbol. So you are not looking on me, what I've done, what I'm thinking. You are just, you will do it, killing me because I'm a symbol of bourgeoisie. Yeah? So Lenin gave orders during the Civil War, go on and take hundreds of richer peasants, kulaks, and kill them. You must hang them, that everybody sees them. Just this, don't ask about what they have done, but if they are really there against us. Just as a symbol that nobody will be ready to use the weapon against us. This is terror. It's, it's not. It's very special form of violence, and he already in December 1970 said, "Go out, and every one out of every 10 persons who are just going around and not doing something useful, you must kill." He was, and you can find a lot of others. That means terror is regarding the other just as an instrument, just as means, which is totally against, of course, human dignity and so on. Okay, these are the ideas, and all these ideas have had a lasting impact. Now I'm coming to the third part I want to speak about. In late 1920, the larger part of the Civil War was over, and I will now look how Lenin acted with regard to state problems after the real victory. The real victory was only after all the internal and external enemies were defeated. I'm now developing 6 points. The first point is, if you are looking what Lenin and his comrades promised, and if you are looking on the outcome, they were totally different. In 1917, Lenin said, if we are using immediately and the hard-way civil war, there will be little or no bloodshed at all, almost no bloodshed. And of course, if you're looking on October, November 1917, really not too much killings. But as I already said, 10 million people in the end died. Civil war is, and Lenin was totally frankly later, civil war is the most terrible point of a way of war. Secondly, before the war, when during immediately after the revolution, immediately after the revolution, Kautsky said that workers immediately after the revolution are not able to govern themselves. And Lenin was saying, this is absurdity. You are an idiot, a critic. You see nothing but bourgeois parliaments. But then in 1921, he was criticizing, I come to the workers' opposition in the Bolshevist party. He said, it's totally clear that the proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat can't be exercised by the masses themselves. So you see, everything is changing immediately. In 1917, as I said, he said we must destruct all the old state apparatus. And in 1922, he said we still have the old machinery. And our task now is to remold it along new lines. That means before the revolution, we must destroy it, and after the revolution, he was facing the reality that the state somehow, the old state, somehow survived. In 1917, he said the ruling class, there wouldn't be any bureaucrats. In 1921, 22, bureaucratism for Lenin became the main enemy. The main enemy. Okay. And also, the problem he was facing after the Civil War was, okay, the power was in the hand of the Bolshevist leadership somehow, but at the last party congress, he was able to attend in March 1922. He said, the state is in our hands, but is the state operating in the way we want? No, it's not operating in the way we want. He was saying the machine refused to obey the hand that guided it. That means he was facing a situation where the system, the society, and the state created by this revolution were developing tendencies he and his comrades could not steer. They had their own logic, and logic opposing the ideas the Bolsheviks and Lenin had. And then, in the end of the Civil War, came a terrible situation, as often when the victory is there, then the internal contradictions are coming to the forefront. During the Civil War, external contradictions. After the Civil War, the internal contradictions. Peasants uprising in the center of Russia, in the central parts of Russia, strikes in the still existing parts of Russian industry, Petrograd also, and of course the uprising of soldiers in Kronstadt and the disintegrating of the Red Army. And they had to answer this. And they immediately, very quickly changed the whole policy to what was called later New Economic Policy. So this, now I'm coming to the second point I want to make with regard to the time after the Civil War. The confrontation with the internal contradictions of the new state. The problem is, he was facing a situation where to keep in power. The new power structures must be able to deal with the contradictions between the Soviet state and the peasantry, the Soviet state and the workers, and also how to deal with the contradictions inside the Bolshevist party. The most important discussion at this time was, I think, the last open discussion in the whole time of the Soviet Union was the discussion on the trade unions. because in the party program, I think it was about program of 1918 when they renamed the Bolshevist Party to the Communist Party of Russia, there was written, the trade unions will take over the management of the industry. Totally in line with the old thinking also of the anarchists, self-government of the producing class. Also the old idea. And now a part in the party, famous is Alexander Kollontai, also combining the trade union opposition with feminism, said we must give the trade unions the right to manage the economy. On the other hand was Trotsky, the head of the Red Army, and he said we must militarize the industry. We must put